one of the things that we always talk about is involving all the right players in the process early on at the beginning. So, how early do you guys like to be engaged? I mean, I'll say I like to bring the landscape designer on, you know, at some point during the architectural design.
Yes, that would be the case. I mean, it's even getting to the point now where, ASID, the American Association Society for Interior Design, right? They've got all their designers talking with landscape architects because the flow between the outside of the home and the inside of the home needs to be proper. And if you just design the inside of the house and then landscaping's an afterthought, when we're talking millions of dollars for homes, these little details matter. They matter to the clients, whether they know it or not. Later on down the line, the last thing you want as a company or a custom builder is to have somebody have buyer's remorse or not be completely happy with their purchase. And I think planning goes a long way to preventing those kind of issues. The earlier in the process that we can get involved, I think, is the better.
Welcome back to the Your Project Shepherd Construction Podcast. Today, we are going to be talking about landscaping and what that costs and how that ties into successfully planning your project. And with us to talk about that today is our guest, Elliot Owen. He's the business development manager with Hogue Landscaping. Elliot, thanks for being with us.
First of all, thanks for inviting us out, man. We really appreciate being a part of this and getting to talk a little bit about ourselves and learn more about what you guys do as well. So Hogue Landscape Services is a full service landscape architecture design, installation, and maintenance firm. So we have 2 licensed landscape architects on staff. We also work with 3 or 4 other independent designers. And then we have 4 full-time install crews and 5 full-time maintenance crews. So, 26 trucks all over the city of Houston. And we can help you with as little or as much as your project at your home as you're looking to help.
Are you guys doing residential and commercial? Are you doing big and small? Kind of what things do y'all cover?
Yeah, we do a little bit of everything, but I would say our bread and butter, we're 90% residential. I would say high-end residential, but when it comes to landscape architecture design, there really isn't a low end, right? Anybody that's paying for designs and installations is that's kind of in a different realm.
Yeah. So before we get into our discussion, one thing that you and I were chatting about before we started recording was Hogue and what you guys support, or how you support the community and how you support education. And I think this is fantastic. I just wanted to touch on it real quick, recap our previous discussion for our guests about, your passion, Matthew, the owner's passion,
Sure.
and how Hogue supports, education and the community.
We are only here because the community supports us, and what better way to say thank you than give back to the community. I graduated from the University of Houston, and so did Matthew, our owner. And youth and education are 2 initiatives that are near and dear to Matthew and Laura Hogue. And there's probably 100 different organizations that we donate to or sponsor or assist with, but just the rodeo, Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo, which just concluded, and then the University of Houston over the past 3 years, we've been able to donate almost just near $1 million to youth and education initiatives. And that's something that I'm very proud of, very proud to be a part of an organization that cares about the community and is willing to, give back. Obviously, owners could take that money and go and buy them a new car or, go on more vacations. But, we try to invest our profits back into the company, to our employees, and then obviously into the community as well.
And that's fantastic. Well, let's get into our discussion about landscaping and kind of what that costs. First of all, I've seen so many new homes that get built where they put so much money into designing the new home, building the new home, and then the landscaping is almost like an afterthought.
Yeah.
You'll see like this beautiful big home with just like a little row of shrubs in front, maybe a little bed color, some flowers and some sod, and that's it, right?
Right.
So they just totally skimp on the landscaping side. Why do you think this happens? Like, is it just because people don't plan for it? Do they not value that during the design process, or maybe just they just blow their whole budget on the house?
I mean, it could be all of those things. It could be none of those things, right? But I think that sometimes it may just be that the designer and the architect, that they wanted that simple, clean look, that the client was requesting low maintenance, or something to that effect. Or it could be that the builder had overruns, and landscaping is the last thing that happens. And oh, I went 25 grand or 50 grand over on my build. Where can I pull that out of? Well, we don't have to have 10 trees on site. We only have to have two per the guidances or the standards for the area. So let's just do that. And I think not being involved, a lot of builders, they don't necessarily bring landscape design or architecture into the process. At the same time, they're thinking about other design, and when they're talking about budgets. And I think where we help bring value to custom builders specifically is we can educate the client, talk to them about what they're wanting to do with their outdoor spaces, figure out what their budgets for those type of projects are, whether it's a new build or a remodel. And I think the earlier we're brought into the process, the better we're able to help those things out.
One of the things that we always talk about is involving all the right players in the process early on at the beginning. So, how early do you guys like to be engaged? I mean, I'll say I like to bring the landscape designer on, at some point during the architectural design.
Yes, that would be the case. I mean, it's even getting to the point now where ASID, the American Association Society for Interior Design, right? They've got all their designers talking with landscape architects because the flow between the outside of the home and the inside of the home needs to be proper. And if you just design the inside of the house and then landscaping's an afterthought, when we're talking millions of dollars for homes, these little details matter. They matter to the clients, whether they know it or not. Later on down the line, the last thing you want as a company or a custom builder is to have somebody have buyer's remorse or not be completely happy with their purchase. And I think planning goes a long way to preventing those kind of issues. The earlier in the process that we can get involved, I think, is the better.
I think people want to have kind of an overall vision for the project. They want the house, the landscape, everything to kind of be harmonious, to all work together, and that's not going to happen unless all those parties are working together at the beginning.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I guess it can happen if you bring that in later on. You have the most success by having all those parties at the table at the beginning.
Yeah, and I agree, 100%.
So here in Houston, especially, we have like this cheap labor market. And I think that people oftentimes will kind of skip the professional design, professional installation, because kind of everybody, at least here in our market, kind of knows a guy. Everybody's got like a yard guy who also can put some plants in for you.
Sure.
Hey man, I get a discount at the nursery. I have a good eye for doing this, and so people often are like rely on this guy working out of his truck to do that. And for certain price range of homes,
Of course.
I think there's a place for some of that. Not everybody can afford high end landscaping or a high end custom home, right?
Sure.
But sometimes that works out and sometimes it doesn't. So, tell us like why should somebody work with a company like Hogue? Why should somebody work with a professional landscape design and installation company?
So I think the value that working with a company like ours is in if you're going through the design process, right? So we do straight to install projects, certain dollar values. If there's things that don't require a master plan, we have that option for people as well. But if you're going the design route, a little planning goes a long way. And taking into account irrigation, we're licensed irrigators, taking into account drainage, all your hardscapes. Are you putting in sod, synthetic turf? The whole scope of the project, when it's being implemented or phased in, maybe a client has a budget of $250,000, but they only want to spend $75,000 at a time or $50,000 a year for the next 5 years. If you don't plan that out properly and you put what should have gone in at year 3, year 1, then when you get to year 2, now you got to tear out year 1, and all that money you would have saved by going with some two guys in a truck or whatever it may be, is already out the window, and now you're in the hole, right? So a little bit of planning goes a long way. And I mean, our cost on a design, we're talking $500 to $5,000, depending on the size, the scope, front yard, backyard, whole property, what's all involved. And when we're talking tens of thousands of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars for landscaping, it's really a drop in the bucket that, a little bit of cost up front can save you a ton of money on the back end. And I think that's one of the main pieces of value that we bring to the market.
And a professional designer is going to know things about like choosing the right plants
Yeah.
for the soil type, the climate zone, like how much sun and shade you're getting on your property.
Yes.
Right.
So it's pretty crazy for me. I did not come from a landscaping background. I've got 12 years of sales and business development, but Houston, especially with the change in climate over the last several years, we've had hotter summers and more extreme freezes in winters. So now more than ever is it important to have professionals who are conscious of those things and can plan for the right plant material. I mean, we're seeing more Eagleston hollies go in than ever before because they survived the freeze. We're moving away from a lot of people are moving away from boxwoods, and they're moving to dwarf yaupons because of blight and some of the sicknesses and illnesses that the boxwoods are susceptible to. Um, you know, there's all different things to take into consideration, and not just dig a hole, throw a plant in the ground, and let it rip. It's are we what are we doing to the soil? Are we adding compost? Are we using all, microlife organic fertilizer products? How are we helping to reintroduce organic material back into the soil that over the long term is going to help your garden thrive? Because the type of clients that we're working with, they have us come in, spend all this money on an installation, and a lot of times we're maintaining it as well. And we want to do it right because if something dies, we're going to have to replace it, right?
Right.
Especially in that first year period. So the more effort and the more work that's put in on the front end, doing it the right way, long term, that's going to have such a great effect on the look of your home.
That's one of the things that I see quite often with kind of the cheaper guy or the guy working out of his truck, or even builders who are often trying to do their own landscape work and not hire a professional. You'll see people come in and just not prepare the soil. You'll see like pallets of sod just get laid straight on top
Clay.
of the existing ground, or the clay from the construction that got churned up, or just dump a thin layer of topsoil on top of the ground, drop the plants in there, and call it a day. That's the MO for a lot of builders, honestly.
Certificate of occupancy. That's what they're after, right?
Right. And then 3 months later, the property looks like crap.
Yeah, and I mean, if you're buying a multi-million-dollar home, if you can afford that, you can afford a little planning and forethought so that your property looks like it should. I mean, it's a beautiful home. Make sure it looks like a beautiful home. Now, unless you're going for some kind of like minimalistic zero-scape design, but again, that's not usually the reason that kind of thing's happening.
Well, even that stuff takes a lot of proper planning.
It does.
to execute. It's like building a modern home. Same thing. It's like the modern home might have way less in the way of trim details and clean walls and less ornamentation, but the work it takes to achieve that is significant. And the same thing with the minimalistic landscaping. Your drainage has to be planned out. You have to choose the right plants
100%.
for the ones that you are installing that aren't going to die on you. So
Yeah, no, I agree. And those kind of designs, like a super modern home or a minimalistic landscaping design, when there are mistakes, they stick out even more because there's not all this material there to hide the imbalances or hide the inaccuracies. And so again, it goes back to planning. Really does.
is there any kind of like guideline cost that people should have in mind when they are planning landscaping for a project, like a percentage of the total value of the house, or a cost per acre or per square foot of land, or any kind of guideline number that you can use for planning?
I would say usually what we say is about 10%. Now that's going to include irrigation, your drainage, your landscaping. If you want to throw a pool in there, maybe 10 to 15%, because pools are are, going through the
They
roof.
could be 10% or more on their own.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. So, but from a landscaping only perspective, sans pool, I would say about 10%. Now, obviously of course, there's wiggle room there. You can do less, you can do more, but generally 10% is kind of what we advise clients on. I mean, our average front yard, total redo is about $50,000, and same for a backyard, $50,000 to $75,000. But we do projects from a few $1,000s all the way up to, we had one home last year, we did $2.2 million in install at one property here in Houston on 4 acres.
Oh,
Yeah, that was pretty special.
in those budgets, what are the big cost drivers? I think labor is always going to be a big component of that, right? It's probably our biggest expense in any construction project. But let's just use a $1 million property for a nice example. Using your 10%, $100,000 worth of landscaping budget, what are the big cost drivers on spending $100,000?
I mean, it really depends on the project. I mean, it's very similar to somebody that comes to a custom home builder and says, "How much does it cost per square foot to build a house?" Well,
Exactly.
what kind of house do you want? How big a house? What kind of finishes do you want? And landscaping's the same way. Do you want $100,000 worth of plant material and fancy trees, and that you can get trees from $50 all the way to tens of thousands of dollars, right? Or is it a majority of your budget is going to be eaten up because you want a concrete pad and a covered pergola, and you want to do an outdoor kitchen with an entertainment space and a jumbotron television, right? It really all depends on what the client is trying to achieve, which again goes back to what's so important about planning things out, talking with the clients about what is it that you want to utilize this space for. When you come home and you want to go in the backyard, which we're seeing now more than any time, that I've experienced, especially post-COVID, when everybody was home and they had to start living at home and enjoying these spaces. They realized, oh man, I want to do something different here. I don't really I want to be out here, but I don't really enjoy it. So they put a lot more thought into that. But everybody's so different, especially in a city like Houston. I mean, we've got people from all over, all different backgrounds and cultures and preferences and whatever else it is. So I want to answer the question, but I think it really just depends on what somebody is trying to achieve. Because if you're going to turf the whole backyard and put in a couple sports courts, well, irrigation is not a big consideration.
Right.
But if we're going to be creating tons of bed areas with ground cover and seasonal color and shrubbery and trees and ivies and vines, irrigation is obviously going to play a huge factor in that. And then the drainage for all the irrigation runoff and the plant material, everything that else is created. So it's really, again, I think it really comes down to the client's specific needs.
Yeah. Because if you're going to have a Zen garden in the backyard where you're going to kind of go meditate and sit versus maybe you're really into gardening and you want to spend a lot of time pruning roses and all that kind of stuff, that looks a lot different than somebody who just wants a place to hang out and watch football games. And
100%.
And also, how much do you want to touch it yourself? Do you want to maintain that stuff, or do you want very low maintenance?
We a lot of times try, we try to design to a budget for a client, because you'll see clients, we get people that come in and say, "Oh, I have a design. Can you bid it?" Sure, of course. We'd be happy to bid this design that you've gotten from a pure design firm that doesn't do installation. They don't do maintenance. They're just, they're a landscape architect or an independent designer. And we price it out and it's like, "Hey, this is going to be $150,000. Oh, well, I was thinking more like 25 to 30,000. And I'll ask people, "Well, what was the budget that you gave your designer?" And they're just like, "Well, I didn't give them a budget. I just told them I wanted a really cool backyard." And I'm like, "Well, they made you a really cool backyard. It just happens to be a really cool backyard that costs $100,000. So then we go from there and we can try to work with someone to, value engineer. Do we go from 100-gallon trees down to 65 or 30 gallons, knowing that it's going to take so many years for them to achieve the look that you were planning for initially? Or do we not plant things maybe as densely, or we remove this section over here. I mean, there's things we can do to work with that, but again, could have saved a lot of time and effort and money by planning that out properly. And I think that's where a company like ours, since we're involved in every step of the process, when we're designing something, we're not only thinking about the installation, but we're thinking about how maintainable is this? If we're going to have to maintain it and we're creating problems for ourselves, that's a whole separate issue. So if we're creating a garden that we're going to maintain, we may design that a little differently than, like you said, if somebody's a green thumb and they just want to spend time pruning roses, there's differences there.
Yeah. So I think a lot of that budget can also get eaten up by the things that I call the non-sexy stuff, like your drainage, your irrigation. A big issue that we're having in Houston right now is underground detention, storage. So a lot of a $100,000 budget can get sucked up just in the stuff that you're never going to see, that you're not going to get to enjoy, right?
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about underground retention detention. The city is becoming so much more strict with that, and I think that working with a company like ours that knows all the requirements, like what ROPO wants and what WestU requires, and you could spend $250,000 on a storm tech system for underground retention detention, and if you come into a project thinking, well, I want to do all this for X amount of money, you could blow through it just on the retention detention, because the cost for these arc chamber systems now, what other option do you have other than putting in like corrugated metal pipe? But I mean, there's just so many things, so many variable factors that go into these designs, that the unsexy things, as you say, can eat up a lot of the budget for sure.
Talk about how the existing conditions of the property can also affect cost. Um, I think people have a misconception where they're like, "Well, I already have some landscaping in place."
They're like, "I already have a flower bed. Why do you need to bring in soil?" I'm like, "Have you seen the soil in Houston? It's basically clay." Yeah, I think that existing condition, a lot of time, very rarely do we come in and somebody has immaculate soil that's been, utilizing organic fertilizers for the past 10 years, and they're composting and adding topsoils. And a lot of time that's what we're having to do, is really overhaul the flower beds or the landscaping to prepare it for all of this new growth and long-term success. When we're not just coming in to drop things in and leave. We want to help people transform their landscapes, transform their homes, and make a plan for the long term, as long as they're going to be in that home and enjoy that space.
I think a lot of times what we see is, especially in like 1950s homes where nothing major has been done with the yard in 70 years, whatever, is that soil has just been, well, first of all, it was played to begin with. It was never prepared 50 or 70 years ago. And then it's just been compacted and compacted over the years. You'll see like the yards with a lot of bare spots in them. The soil is just not, it's not getting any air. It's not breathing. It's not getting good drainage. And so really you have to kind of just strip off that whole top layer before you can even go back, place the right kind of soil, mix it in, right?
Yeah. I mean, when we go to lay, we get calls all the time from companies that say, "Hey, I want you to come out and do my new commercial property, and I want you to lay the grass." And I'm like, "Look, man, I'm happy to do it, but you're not going to want to pay what it costs, because what it costs to do it the right way is not what companies are charging from a commercial perspective to lay grass." They do what you said, is there's clay on the ground and they literally just go out and drop it on the ground. Well, yeah, anybody with a truck can just take sod and throw it on the floor, but is it going to survive? Is it going to thrive? Is it going to look beautiful? No, it's not. It's coming in and scraping off, 1 or 2 inches of topsoil, and then backfilling with a compost and a fertilizer, that organic fertilizer, putting the grass down, rolling over the top of it. I mean, there's like a multi-step process, and that's just for laying sod. And it's the same across the board for plant materials. Okay, are you planting that type of plant at the right height? Are you covering up the root ball? Is your mulch right against the trunk of the tree? Are we creating issues where illnesses and bacterias and different funguses can get into the trees? There's all these different things that most people just don't think of. Heck, I didn't think about it a year ago when I wasn't in this space. I didn't know about any of those things. But the longer I'm in this field, the more I realize working with somebody who is truly an expert and has, years and years of knowledge to draw from, uh, that adds a lot of benefit. I mean, me personally, I don't have years of knowledge, but Matthew, our owner, he's been in this business 20 years. One of our staff members, Carl, he's been in this business for 40 years. Jody, who is our director of maintenance, she runs our entire maintenance program and all of our irrigation department. She's been in this industry for 25 years. Uh, Former president of the TNLA in a certain region, and so we have a wealth of knowledge base to draw from as a company, and I think that brings a lot of value.
So let's change gears just a little bit.
Sure.
What are some landscaping and outdoor living features today that are popular that you guys are seeing a lot? And what are some easy kind of value add-on items that people might not think about?
Well, one, especially in the city of Houston, last year we had the drought and the city told people, hey, you got to stop watering. Well, your grass dies. And after 2 or 3 times of replacing sod, a lot of people are like, man, I don't want to do this anymore. So synthetic turf is something that we're seeing a huge growth for demand in. Now within that area, pavers. People want the synthetic turf, but then they also want a patio, but they don't want a full concrete pour patio, so they'll do 2x2 or 3x3 pavers in like a diamond pattern or a checkerboard pattern with the synthetic turf, and we see that a lot lately. And you could do the same thing with Black Star gravel or Silver Mist or some type of gravel with pavers in between. But that paver look is very, very popular right now.
What are some easy things that people can add on to a project that add a lot of value? I think the turf is a great thing. That's something that's going to cost you more upfront to do, but it might save you in the long run having to replace, right?
Yeah, well, one, you're not watering it. Two, you're not mowing it. So those are 2 cost savers right there. Now, people say, oh, it's maintenance free. That's not true. There is EnviroFill is like an antimicrobial polymer sand that gets added into the turf after it's brushed up. That serves a few purposes. One, it helps to weigh down the turf because it's effectively carpet, and it helps to support the blades within the turf. And then also it is antimicrobial. So when you have pets go into the bathroom or it is a plastic product that's outdoors and there's humidity. So there is a potentiality for bacteria. This helps to mitigate all of those things. That you add in maybe once a year. You backfill it a little bit. But again, that's about the extent of the maintenance on something like that. And your cost up front, you're looking at maybe 3 to 4 times the initial investment. But after about a 5-year period, you're at the break-even point. And then the turf itself is warranted for like 15 or 16 years, depending on the manufacturer, against like sun fading and things like that. So long term, yeah, you're looking at significant cost savings in the long term.
What other items are kind of like popular add-ons or things that are in vogue right now that you guys are seeing a lot of?
We see all kinds of crazy things. I've got a house right now in Westview that we're putting in a 6-person barrel sauna. It's a 9-foot by 7-foot barrel sauna, and then they have a ice bath, like a plunge tank that generates its own ice. Obviously, outdoor kitchens, pergolas are huge right now. Whether it's a wooden pergola or a aluminum prefabricated pergolas, just really, again, it depends on what the client wants. We're seeing a lot of different pickleball courts. We used to do a lot more basketball courts. Now we've had 3 or 4 pickleball courts, I think, in the last 6 to 9 months. That seems to be very popular. Pickleball is very trendy these days.
Mm-hmm.
So
I think the multi-use sport courts are popular too, where they can have a basketball goal for the kids. They can put up the pickleball net for mom and dad, or
absolutely
badminton or whatever.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of conversions too, where they're going to resurface their basketball court, or they have there's like a modular tile system that kind of raises the court up from the concrete, and they're tearing that out and they're turning it into like a multi-court surface. So we're seeing that as well.
People actually play badminton anymore. I'm not sure why I said badminton, but
way to date yourself.
So, what does it cost for somebody to work with Hogue on doing their design side of things? What do you guys charge for design?
Yeah, and of course that depends
It
on
depends.
what's the scope of the project. But I would say anywhere from $500 to $5,000, and that's not including CD's construction drawing. If there's construction drawings that are needed, we usually charge like 5 to 10% of the cost of the proposal for the creation of those engineered drawings. But yeah, no, from purely a design perspective, we're talking $500 to $5,000, and that depends again on scope.
I think like with all other professional design services, and this conversation has a great parallel with our other architects and interior designers that we've had on the show. Spending that money up front is going to come back to you in the long run. It can actually save you money in the long run.
Easily.
As we talked about, choosing something that's going to last and work in our climate zone, or coming up with a plan that can be phased out with a 2, 5, 10-year plan as you have the funds available, or just by making sure that you have the best looking yard in the neighborhood and winning yard of the month.
Yeah. Like you said, a little planning goes a long way. Just with something as simple as planting and irrigation, taking everything else out of the equation. You put your irrigation in first, and then you go into plant, and it's not exactly where everything needs to be. Now you got to go back and make modifications. If you're working with licensed irrigators, they're not cheap. They're licensed professionals. It takes time to earn that licensing, and they charge accordingly. And so again, a little planning goes a long way. And usually, if somebody's apprehensive, we get it. Like, why should I have to pay for a design? Well, we're professionals. We're helping you through this process. We're going to help you create a plan of action because we don't want to double spend your money. We tell people that all the time. We want to spend your money like it's our money. And I like spending my money once. I don't like spending it twice. So whatever we can do to help people through the process and make sure it's a smooth one, an enjoyable experience.
All right. Well, I think we're gonna wrap it up there. Tell us if people want to work with you guys, how they get in touch with Hogue, and so give us your website and social medias and all that kind of stuff.
Sure. So our website is www.hogue, HOGUELS for Landscape Services. So that's hoguels.com. You can call our office 713-360-6924. And also we're on pretty much every social media platform: Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. We post like 5 times a week on Instagram, 5 times a week on Facebook, and 3 or 4 times a week on Instagram. That's at Hogue Landscape. We would love to have people reach out and help them with their landscaping needs.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been great talking to you.
Yeah, man, I've really enjoyed it. Thanks so much for having us out.
And thank you all for watching and listening to us on the Your Project Shepherd podcast. Good landscape design fits right in with our house diagram that we always talk about on the show. And we'll show that for you on the screen if you're watching. That foundation is proper planning. The left wall is your team. The right wall is communication. And the roof protecting it all is proper execution. Have all 4 of those components in place, and your project is going to succeed. We'll see you next time on the Your Project Shepherd podcast.